I was a drone operator at a military training base. This was 3 months ago. I'd worked as a technician before moving to this role, where I trained new recruits. The nights could be lonely. The base was isolated, surrounded by barbed wire and empty fields. It felt like a ghost of my past military life. I haven't stopped thinking about what happened. One night, I sat in front of the thermal imaging screen. I watched soldiers move on the ground below. My heart was steady, everything seemed normal. Then I saw them figures that didn't move right. They seemed off. Maybe it was just glitches. I shook my head. The screen flickered, and I told myself it had to be malfunctioning. But the feeling lingered in my gut that I brushed it off, but I saw them more often. Soldiers in gear that looked wrong. Some wore old uniforms. My colleagues laughed it off, saying I was just stressed or didn't get enough sleep. Maybe they were right, but I couldn't shake the unease. Something in me felt sick. During the day, I dove into files and old reports about operations that went wrong. I thought maybe there was something I wasn't meant to find. I became obsessed. I wanted to understand what I was seeing. My mind raced. I needed to know if it was just me or if something was out there. At night, the surveillance operations felt more like a trap. I sat in my dark room, with only the hum of machines and the clicking of my mouse. I stared at the screen, hoping for clarity. All I saw were figures moving in strange ways. A chill ran down my spine with every glimpse of those soldiers. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. One evening, a figure stood still and stared at me. My heart raced. I wanted to look away, but I was drawn to it. I asked over the radio if anyone else saw it. Silence answered back. All I could hear was my breathing. I felt dread creeping in. It was like something was waiting for me to look away. On the last day of my shifts, it felt different. The figure seemed to speak to me. I swear I heard a voice crackle through the radio, "Help us." I jumped back, my heart pounding. I wanted to shake it off as just static, but deep down, I wasn't sure what I'd seen. I looked around for answers, but the silence just hung in the air. I felt completely alone in this. The next night, I returned to the screen. I felt a pull to know the truth. As I scanned the area, the same figure came into view. It stood there, waiting. I was scared, yet I couldn't turn away. Something told me that the answers I sought were lurking in the shadows. I didn't want to find out the truth, but it felt like it was all closing in on me. And now, I'm left wondering if the soldiers were real, or if it was just me. I don't really want to know the answer. I went back to the control room, shaking off the darkness that clung to the air. The flickering lights overhead felt oppressive. I knew I had to keep digging. I had one more night before I was off duty. I'd spend it searching for clues. As I settled into my chair, I noticed the thermal screen still illuminated. I took a deep breath and opened the feed. My stomach twisted as the familiarity of the distorted figures returned. They moved like shadows, managing to blend in yet stand apart from everything else. Old uniforms, weapons I'd never seen. I tried to focus, scanning the thermal layers for any sign of clarity. My hands trembled as I adjusted the controls. The clicking of buttons echoed around the room, each sound a reminder of how isolated I felt. Just me and the empty rooms. I glanced at the clock. Midnight. The world outside was shrouded in darkness, just as I was about to step into. Then I saw it again. The figure. The same one that haunted my thoughts for the last few nights. This time, it was clear. It stood still, not moving, just staring back at me. I felt goosebumps rising on my arms. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was looking into my soul. My heart pounded in my chest. Trembling, I reached for the radio. "Can anyone hear me? I'm seeing figures on the thermal. Something is wrong." My voice sounded small and shaky in the silence. No response. I swallowed hard and tried to breathe. Was I really alone? Suddenly, the figure shifted. It raised its arm, pointing towards something off-screen. My breath hitched. I didn't understand what it wanted. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to run. But this was about more than just my fear now. I had to uncover the truth that I tried to follow where the figure pointed. The screen flickered again, and for a moment, a different image flashed before me. A wide open field like the ones around the base, but there were buildings in the distance that I didn't recognize. My pulse quickened. Was this a new site? An operation I wasn't briefed on? Then everything went dark. The screen went blank, and the hum of machinery cut out. I sat frozen in my chair, heart racing. A sudden chill swept through the room, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Panic surged through me. I glanced around, hoping to catch a glimpse of something familiar. My eyes darted back to the screen, but it remained lifeless. The silence grew louder, pressing in on me. When suddenly, the radio crackled to life. They know. The distorted voice sent shivers down my spine. I wanted to scream. Who knows? My voice was barely a whisper. I felt hot tears prick at my eyes. But it didn't respond. All I could hear was the echo of my own breath, a harsh reminder of isolation. What did I uncover? What was happening? I needed to find out more. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse, the door to the control room creaked open. The door swung open slowly, the hinges letting out a ghostly creak that felt like a warning. I twisted in my chair, heart racing, ready to bolt if I had to. But there was no intruder standing there. Just darkness, stretching into the corridor beyond. Hello? I called, my voice shaky. No answer. I gathered the courage to leave my chair, every footfall cautious and deliberate. I crept towards the door, peering into the dim hallway. The shadows seemed to shift as if alive, teasing me with their movements. Part of me wanted to bolt back into the control room, lock the door and hide. But I needed answers that I stepped into the hallway, keeping my body low, ready for anything. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow. I strained my ears, listening for any sound. Footsteps. Breathing. But all was still. I didn't want to admit it, but the fear grew heavier with every second. As I moved along the corridor, I felt the weight of my decision hanging over me. Was I really prepared to confront whatever was going on here? The idea of facing that figure again sent a shiver down my spine. I shook my head to clear my thoughts. I made my way to the nearest exit. My mind raced back to the thermal image, those unfamiliar buildings in the landscape. I felt an urge to see them for myself. Maybe that was where all this chaos started. I reached the end of the corridor and hesitated at the door that led outside. When I pushed it open, the cold air hit me like a wall. The night sky stretched out above, a blanket of stars twinkling with indifferent brightness. I took a step outside, heart pounding. The vast field lay before me, dark and silent. The only sound was the rustling of grass, and for a moment, it felt incredible to be free from the suffocating walls of the base. But the relief was short-lived. Just then, a whistle sliced through the air, low and sharp. I froze. It sounded like a signal. A response. My pulse quickened. I scanned the area, searching for the source. That's when I noticed movement at the edge of the field. Dark figures, just like the ones I'd seen on the thermal feed. My breath caught in my throat, there were more of them. I could barely make out their forms in the dim light, but they seemed to be gathering around something. They moved with purpose, like soldiers preparing for an operation. A sense of dread washed over me. Why were they here? What were they planning? Stay hidden, I muttered to myself, instinct kicking in. I crouched low and edged closer, straining to hear their whispers. I wanted to know more, to connect the dots, but fear clawed at my throat. Then one of them turned. Through the shadows, I recognized the uniform. It was from my base. A chill ran through my veins. Were they real? Or another illusion? Before I could process it, one of the figures raised a hand, and it felt like they were looking right at me. The realization hit me hard, I wasn't alone anymore. And I wasn't safe. Just as I turned to retreat, a voice resonated through the darkness, chilling and clear, "You shouldn't have come here." I gasped, and suddenly, everything felt like it was closing in on me. I barely had time to react before the weight of the voice settled over me. Panic surged through my veins as I stumbled back, losing my footing. I hit the ground hard, breath knocked out of my lungs. My heart raced as I scrambled to push myself upright again, eyes darting to where I had seen the figures. The darkness felt like it was pressing in on me, suffocating. I needed to get away, to regroup and think, but my body refused to move. Stillness wrapped around me like a blanket as I focused on my breathing, trying to drown out the voice that still echoed in my ears. I glanced again toward the figures, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Then it clicked. They were set up in a half-circle, crouched over something on the ground. My skin crawled at the thought of whatever dark ritual they might be performing. My mind raced to the classified documents I had read about the experiments conducted at the base. Had they escalated to something more sinister? Suddenly, one of the figures stepped forward, pulling something into the light. It was a small device, flickering with blue lights. My stomach dropped. I had seen that device before in the labs. It was used for surveillance monitoring our own operations. What were they doing with it out here? As if sensing my thoughts, the figure paused. I held my breath, heart pounding loudly in my ears, waiting for him to look my way. The others remained focused on whatever plan they had, but I felt that one pair of eyes trained on me. I had to know what was going on. I needed to figure out why they were here, that I couldn't stay hidden much longer. My instincts kicked in, and I silently began to crawl back, quietly as possible. I needed to get behind the stacked crates nearby, they might offer some cover. With every movement, I cursed my shaky hands and nerves. The stars twinkled overhead, but they offered no comfort, only a reminder of how isolated I felt. Just as I made it behind the crates, a loud crack echoed through the quiet night. I froze. One of the figures shouted something in a language I didn't understand. Voices erupted, and I felt adrenaline surge through me again. They were on high alert now, scanning the area with urgency. I pressed myself against the rough surface of the crates, heart racing. My mind was spinning. I had to get closer, but now the tension was palpable. The figures had lost their focus on whatever they were doing and were beginning to fan out, searching the field for any signs of life. I had to make a choice, stay hidden and observe more, or risk it all and find a way to confront them. Before I could weigh the options, something flickered in the corner of my eye. A drone hovered low, its camera scanning back and forth. That's when I realized it was searching for me. The chill returned, sharper this time. I had uncovered something world-shifting, but it was clear, I was running out of time. I couldn't let them find me, not yet. I held my breath, praying for a chance to slip away. Then everything changed. "Found him!" shouted one of the soldiers. I felt my blood run cold. The chase was on. I bolted from behind the crates, instincts kicking in. Every muscle screamed for me to run. I ducked low, zigzagging through the field as branches snagged at my clothes. The night was a cacophony of shouts and footsteps pounding the ground behind me. I had never been truly hunted before, but I could feel their urgency, a predatory thrill pulsating in the air. Searching for cover, I spotted a thicket of bushes a few meters away. My heart raced as I sprinted toward it, branches scratching at my skin. The drone whirred overhead, casting an eerie beam of light that turned the leaves into unsettling shadows. I dove into the bushes just as the light swept past me. My breath came in sharp bursts, each inhalation laced with panic. Hunched low, I listened intently. The soldiers were regrouping, and their voices drifted closer. "He went this way," one shouted, his voice rough with adrenaline. Split into 2 teams. Flank him. I clenched my jaw. They were everywhere. Panic threatened to envelop me again, but I forced it back. Focus, focus. I needed to think. I could hear the men rustling through the grass, searching for any signs of disturbance. I was trapped unless I could figure something out. Then I remembered the device. Whatever those figures were using it for, it must have been significant. If they were at the base, they had to be connected to high-level operations. They were risking exposure. What if I turned this around on them? I dared to peek through the leaves, heart pounding as I scanned for the source of the voices. One soldier was just outside my hiding place, looking through the equipment they had left behind. If I could get to that device, it could help me disable the drone, but there was no time for careful planning. Adrenaline surged again, pushing me past my fears. I started to slink toward the figure, moving slowly to avoid detection. I took slow, shallow breaths, each inch feeling like a monumental task. Suddenly, the soldier turned. I froze, caught in the glaring light of the drone above. His eyes widened in shock. Over there. By the bushes. Without thinking, I lunged forward, making for the device. It was only a few feet away now. I felt the weight of their shouts behind me, the rush of chaos swelling as I reached the small contraption. My fingers flew over the buttons. I needed to try and shut it down. Before I could even think, the figure was on me. He lunged, grabbing my collar, but I twisted away, elbowing him as I dove for the device. It felt heavy in my hands as I ripped it away from the ground. Stop! He yelled, but the noise around us was thunderous now. I fumbled with the switches, praying I could disrupt the drone's signal. My heart stopped as the lights on the device flickered ominously, then everything went dark. The drone buzzed erratically, its light cutting off as it slammed into the ground nearby. The soldiers erupted in chaos. I saw my chance that I sprinted back toward the darkness, away from the chaos I had created. The forest engulfed me, the only sound now my ragged breaths and the distant yells of the soldiers behind me. It was a moment of pure chaos, but it was mine to control now. Then came a new sound, a loud crash in the brush behind me. I turned to look, and that's when I saw it, shadows moving through the trees, taller and more menacing than the soldiers. I was out of the frying pan and into the fire. I stumbled back, eyes wide. What were those figures weaving between the trees? They moved with a purpose, unlike anything I had seen before. The soldiers had been relentless, but these were something else entirely. I had no time to decipher what I was witnessing. An instinctual fear gripped me that I ducked behind a thick tree trunk, my breath hitching as I watched the shadows draw closer. They had an otherworldly quality. Tall, dark figures with features obscured, they glided through the underbrush, and I felt the ground tremble slightly beneath their steps. They did not seem to care about the troops nearby, but I sensed they were here for something specific. Then, I caught snippets of their voices, low and guttural, like they were speaking a language not meant for human ears. My heart pounded in rhythm with the sounds around me. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, but I was paralyzed. The chaos among the soldiers grew louder. They were calling out to each other, confusion rippling through the air. Whatever was going on, I knew I couldn't afford to stay exposed. That I hesitated for a few breaths, glancing back at the thicket where I'd hidden earlier. If I could just get away from the trunk, I might find cover in the deeper shadows of the forest. But a movement caught my eye again. One of the figures had stopped, its head tilting in my direction, as though it sensed me. Instinct kicked in. I dashed away from the tree, heart racing as I zigzagged toward the thickest part of the woods. I needed to put distance between myself and that creature. Behind me, I could hear the soldiers shouting again, their shouts turning to panic. "What the hell are they?" one of them yelled. "Get a grip. Stay together." That was my cue. I didn't look back, but I could hear fear creeping into their voices. As I rounded a large oak, I finally found a patch of darkness. I pressed myself against the rough bark, closing my eyes and waiting for a moment to regroup. The night air was thick, buzzing with the distant echoes of confusion and chaos. Suddenly, the ground shook harder, and I opened my eyes. A low growl reverberated through the hills. The sound sent shivers down my spine. What I thought was a tree trunk turned out to be something massive, its shape unmistakable now. A darkness shifted there, and I realized it was one of those figures. It was closer than I thought, blending in with the shadows like a predator waiting for its prey. That I found myself frozen again, caught between the dangers of the soldiers and this new, unknown threat. The growl came again, louder this time. I had to think fast. Whatever was happening, I wasn't meant to witness it. But how could I escape without knowing what I was really up against? In that moment of dread, another noise caught my attention. It was a radio crackling nearby, clear and precise. Unidentified entities have breached the perimeter. Engage as necessary. Repeat. The voice faded as fear surged through my veins. I wasn't safe here. I needed to move, to put further distance and confusion between myself and everything else. Just as I started to creep away from the looming figure, lights flickered from the direction of the soldiers. The air crackled with energy, and I could see the panic spreading across their faces. The situation was escalating. That's when I heard it, a sharp, sudden scream. The sound sliced through the night, chilling me to the bone. It was all happening too fast, and I was right in the middle of it. I took a deep breath, trying to silence the panic churning in my stomach. The scream hung in the air like a ghost, filling me with dread. I needed to get out of here. My body was screaming for action, but fear was weighing me down. With every ounce of resolve I had, I turned back to the path. I could see the flickering lights from the soldiers' flashlights piercing through the trees. They were looking for something or someone. I didn't want to be caught in their spotlight. As I scrambled deeper into the woods, I heard the growls again, unmistakably closer. Were they advancing toward the chaos? Was I just moving toward danger instead of away from it? I didn't have time to think. Instinct drove me forward, deeper into the underbrush. Branches snagged at my clothes, and twigs snapped beneath my feet. The air felt alive, electric with tension. I caught glimpses of the strange figures in the distance, shadows shifting with a purpose. I ducked down low, ducking behind a large bush, hoping it would be enough to shield me from view. That I barely had a moment to catch my breath before I noticed something glittering on the ground nearby, a small object that reflected the lights in the distance. Curiosity tugged at me despite the danger, and I crawled closer. When I reached it, I realized it was a metal badge, tarnished yet distinct. The emblem looked familiar, but my mind couldn't place it in the chaos. Then, a loud crash erupted nearby, a sound like trees splintering. My heart raced as I shot back to my hiding spot. A group of soldiers burst through the underbrush, shouting commands, their faces tight with fear. "Fall back! Fall back!" One of them yelled, and I could see that they were retreating, not advancing. I was stunned. What could cause this much panic? I peered through the leaves and saw one of the figures standing unnervingly still, towering above the soldiers. It was like it was waiting, watching. The growl echoed again, low and terrifying, and that's when I realized I wasn't just hiding from the soldiers. What was behind them was something far worse. "Get the drones in the air!" Another soldier shouted. "We need eyes on that thing." Drones? The air hummed with potential, and I felt a new wave of uncertainty. What were they planning to do? I had no time to figure it out. The growl intensified, almost sounding like a warning. I should have fled while I had the chance, but now I was stuck. Then everything went dark. A scream pierced the air, followed by a blinding light. I blinked, trying to regain my sight, as shadows danced around me. I heard scrambling footsteps. My instincts kicked in once more. I needed to move. That's when I saw it, a pair of glowing eyes locking onto me from the wilderness, a reflection of a threat I wasn't ready for. My heart raced, and I stumbled backward. I was out of options. I had to push through the danger ahead or be swallowed by the shadows behind me. I could feel the weight of those glowing eyes pressing down on me, filling the air with a suffocating dread. My senses sharpened, every rustle in the leaves, every snap of a twig echoed like a warning bell. I couldn't stay here. I darted from my hiding spot, adrenaline spurring my feet forward. I was heading deeper into the woods, but the sound of the drones buzzing overhead intermingled with the growls that surrounded me. Whatever that creature was, it felt too close. I had to find shelter, somewhere the soldiers wouldn't find me. Amidst the chaos, I stumbled over a few rocks and fell hard against the ground. Pain shot up my arm, but I pushed through, scrambling back to my feet. As I steadied myself, I remembered the badge I'd found earlier. It was still clenched in my fist, its weight oddly grounding against the rising panic that I glanced around, looking for anything that could help me figure out what was going on. My eyes landed on a large, gnarled tree ahead. Its hollow, dark entrance looked like a perfect hiding spot, and I dashed for it. As I slipped inside, darkness enveloped me, muffling the distant chaos. Inside the hollow, I could hear the sound of my own breath. The tremors of fear faded slightly as I listened intently. I needed a plan, a way to understand what was happening out there. My mind raced with possibilities while my eyes adjusted to the dark. Just then, a familiar buzzing sound echoed from above, the drone instantly piercing the stillness like a knife. Maybe I could use it to my advantage. I remembered reading something about drones. They had cameras that could capture data in real time. I could find out what was happening in the forest, but I needed to get closer without being detected. Cautiously, I peeked out of the hollow. The moonlight illuminated a clearing ahead, and I could see soldiers scrambling, still shouting orders. It felt chaotic, as if they didn't know where to look. That's when I spotted it again, the towering figure, now moving closer, and the sound of its growl vibrating through the ground. I had to see what it was, see how it interacted with the soldiers. I slipped back inside the hollow, my heart racing. I couldn't stay hidden forever, but to get out there I needed courage. Then, I remembered the badge in my hand. I examined it closely. The emblem glimmered under the moonlight. It depicted a creature something similar to the beast I had glimpsed. Below it, words were etched, Project Nightfall. My mind raced. What was Project Nightfall and how did it relate to what I was witnessing? I was shaken back to reality as booms reverberated in the distance and the ground trembled. I had to act now. Time was running out, and whatever was out there was growing restless. I quietly crept back out of the hollow and stood among the underbrush, deciding my next move. I could either blend deeper into the shadows or make a break for the clearing. The beast was close to the soldiers. I could feel it, the tension hung in the air like a thick fog. Suddenly, a loud roar erupted nearby, the sound echoing into the night. My heart sank. I had to find out more about Project Nightfall before it was too late. They were not the only ones hunting here. I took a deep breath and made my choice. It was time to find answers, even if it put my life at risk. The clearing was larger than I anticipated, an island surrounded by thick trees. Soldiers darted across it with flashlights sweeping the ground. My heart raced. I pressed myself against the trunk of a nearby tree, trying to stay hidden. The buzzing overhead intensified, like angry wasps in pursuit of something. I could feel it in the air, a current of fear, a shared understanding that something was coming. Then, the roar echoed again, followed by a terrified scream. A soldier stumbled back, eyes wide with disbelief. A shadow moved in the darkness, the enormous figure charging forward, muscles rippling under matted fur. I strained to see. What was it doing? The creature seemed to be playing a deadly game of cat and mouse with the soldiers. "It's just a drill," one soldier yelled, trying to reassure the others, but his voice trembled. I could see the terror on their faces. Whatever they were facing was no ordinary drill. I edged further into the shadows, remembering the badge in my pocket. What had they created with Project Nightfall? I glanced up at the drone hovering above. It was stationary, zooming in closer to the action. I had to get close enough to catch a glimpse of its feed. What if it could give me answers? I crouched lower, moving stealthily toward the edge of the clearing. My breath quickened. Suddenly, a flash of light erupted near the soldiers. A grenade exploded, sending dirt and debris flying. I flinched, ducking back. This was escalating too fast. If the soldiers couldn't handle it, what chance did I have? I took a deep breath, pushing back the fear that threatened to paralyze me. Now or never, I thought. I surged forward, darting behind trees, trying to stay undetected. The growls of the creature echoed closer, and the soldiers shouted commands, their panic rising with every passing moment. I spotted a small rise in the ground that led deeper into the woods. If I could just reach it, I might be able to see the drone's footage from a better vantage point. As I moved, I caught sight of two soldiers huddled together, arguing fiercely. "That thing is alive. We need to report back," one shouted, breathless with panic. "Are you crazy? It'll hear us," the other shot back, pointing toward the dark edge of the clearing where the creature lurked. My footsteps faltered, the urgency coiled in my chest. Whoever had made Project Nightfall was doing something monstrous. I had to find out more. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught my eye just beyond the soldiers. The creature was charging again, its massive frame illuminated by a sudden burst of artificial light. The soldiers screamed and scrambled back, a few firing wildly into the dark. That I and the chaos, I took a decisive step forward, desperate to catch a glimpse of the creature. I needed to know what they had unleashed. That's when I saw it, a glimmering scale glinting under the moonlight before the creature disappeared back into the shadows. An icy realization settled in me. This creature was far worse than I had imagined. It was real, and somehow, it was tied to Project Nightfall. My heart pounded as I realized I was running out of time. I needed to move. I turned away from the chaos, my mind racing for a way to uncover the truth before it slipped away. But then everything went dark. A sudden, blinding light flooded the clearing, cutting through the night like a knife. It was too late to hide now. I shielded my eyes, heart racing as the brightness overwhelmed me. It was as if the night itself had collapsed, drowning the chaos in stark illumination. Panic surged inside as I turned to run, instinct screaming that whatever was happening was about to reach a boiling point. Around me, soldiers shouted, their silhouettes becoming frantic shadows against the harsh light. I saw them stumbling, the panic on their faces visceral as the creature's growl reverberated through the air, sending them into a flurry. "Hold your ground," someone yelled, but it was too late. I couldn't afford to stay. I surged back into the forest, weaving between trees, branches gnashing at my skin, the ground uneven beneath my feet. The creature's growl morphed into a roar, shaking the air and drumming in my chest with primal fear. I had to escape this nightmare, but I wasn't sure where to go. Suddenly, ducking behind a tree, I paused to collect myself. The chaos from the clearing spilled into the woods, a cacophony of fear and desperation. Crouching low, I heard the frantic footfalls of soldiers mixed with the ominous growls of the creature. It felt like the wilderness itself was alive, hiding secrets and entangling me in threads of fate I couldn't comprehend. That I needed a plan. I had to find a way out, or at least find answers amidst the chaos. My mind raced back to the badge, the emblem of Project Nightfall. What did it all mean? Suddenly, my thoughts were interrupted by another crash. Leaves rustled violently to my right, and I caught a glimpse of the creature. It was massive, its form shifting between shadows, blending seamlessly with the night. Instinctively, I flattened myself against the trunk, my heart pounding furiously. But I felt different than before. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or the looming specter of despair, but I noticed something in those closest feeds. The soldiers were realizing they were not just dealing with a creature, but something more intricate. I knew those distorted figures hadn't just been figments of my imagination. They were part of something larger, a project gone awry. I needed to understand it. Peeking around, I caught sight of the drone once more hovering, its camera feeding critical information back to whoever was in command. My mind raced. I could use the drone to gather insights about the creature, to somehow connect the dots before it was all washed away in the confusion. With emerging resolve, I slipped from the tree's embrace and made my way toward the drone. The sounds of chaos began to fade, the creature's roars now muffled in the distance. I crept low, moving silently yet swiftly. I couldn't allow this opportunity to slip by. As I drew near, I quickly scanned the area. The soldiers had regrouped in disarray behind trees, their faces pale with terror. I had to act fast. The drone was close, its lights still illuminating the surrounding chaos, unaware of my presence. Suddenly, a loud crash reverberated through the air, shaking the ground beneath me. I didn't dare look back, but I felt the tug of pressure rising in my throat. My hands were clammy, each movement deliberate and soft against the forest floor. I was inches away from the drone. My heart raced even as clarity settled. I needed to get the feed to see what could possibly be linked to Project Nightfall. I reached for the drone, fingers grazing the body just as another roar echoed through the woods. A surge of cold washed over me, but right then, an ear-splitting scream erupted from the clearing. Get back. It's coming. Instinct kicked in as I bolted. Everything seemed to blur as I stumbled back into the protective cover of trees. As I ran deeper into the woods, a sinking feeling settled in my gut. I might know neither the soldier's fate nor the creature's true nature, but the looming threat was no longer just confined to that clearing. Days later, I left the training base for good. They continued operations like nothing had happened, but I knew better. I thought about the badge often. Project Nightfall was never decommissioned. I couldn't shake the knowledge that something had escaped their grasp. Sometimes late at night, when the wind howled through the trees, the thought would creep in, were the figures still out there? Did they still roam the darkness? The eerie silence pushed me toward an unease that wouldn't wane. And somewhere, I knew, those soldiers were searching for answers too. I'd never return to that base or uncover the truth. The worries swirled around me like shadows, unfurling in dark corners of the night. And in my mind, I'd always wonder whether the unknown was just a nightmare or something much worse lurking just beyond the light.